So season's changed, winter's here. We're going to run you through everything you need to know and what changes you need to make to your bag for this time of year. So when we're coming into this time of the year, particularly where we are in the UK, the conditions change dramatically. So we're going from mid-30s, baked out, hard, cooked golf course where it's fast and running, course play is shorter at that time of year, to much, much colder, down near 0 degrees like it is this morning, lots more rain, heavier atmosphere, so the course is heavy, wet, it's all through the air. The clubs we're hitting into greens are totally different. It's pretty much a different golf course altogether. So considerations that we're going to need to make based on what is actually going to suit this golf course now are different than they are in the summer. So the first consideration is temperature, which, as we said in the lead-in, huge difference between summer and winter. So we've got a shot here that we've just hit, and this is based on 25 degrees Celsius, so 178.8 yards of carry. Now, the air temperature will affect the distance the ball goes. So if we look at just purely that, on the TrackMan, I can go into the settings. Let's change that temperature from 25 to 5 degrees Celsius. So normalise that, half a club, going down to 173.7. Now bear in mind, this is purely atmospheric temperature change on how the ball flies, not on the human. So we've got half a club straight away for 20 degrees of temperature change in terms of Celsius. Some might use Fahrenheit, that'll be a slightly different number to work out there. But half a club just for how the ball flies through the air based on air density, temperature, efficiency through the air. The human's affected quite a bit as well. So our muscles aren't as loose, we're not going to be as flexible, we're not going to have the range of motion, and we're going to be wearing more clothes. Now we've got this video that we did a little while back where, slightly light-hearted, but adding layers of clothing. The figure was about 1.5 miles once you get over 2 layers for each layer of clothing. So in terms of club speed drop, which means about 2 to 2.5 miles an hour ball speed. So we're going to be hitting, bear in mind, half a club just for the ball flight, take into account body moving less, both for the clothes and the temperature. You're certainly going to take another half a club off. You're going to be at least a club down in that 20 odd degrees of change, at least, purely based on the temperature and how it affects the ball flight and your body. So the next major consideration that we're going to have is ground conditions. So from a ground condition point of view, ultimately, so we're not baked out summer fairways, it's wetter, softer, heavier ground. So it does affect the ball flight. So if you think about it, we're all taught to compress our irons, get on top of it and cover the ball. But if you've got a nice firm base, then the ball can use that, you can press into it and up the ball flight goes. The moment that softens, essentially the ball's going to go into the turf a little bit. If you're hitting down on it and squeezing it, then there's going to be more of it into the turf and squirt out lower. So you're going to see lower launches and lower spins based on a slightly softer turf. It's also going to absorb a little bit more ball speed as well. So rather than fizzing off and getting up high, it's coming a little slower, a little bit lower, a little less spin. So what can we do to remedy that? Well, club selection. So at the upper end of the bag, so for me, I switch between my driving iron and my 5-wood. A long iron is going to come out flatter and it's going to involve a little bit less spin than a fairwood or a hybrid. So the consideration is the course is playing longer, the drives aren't going as far, they're not running out. We know it's not carrying as far, we just looked at the temperature. You've then got more club into the green. You've got to hit more club to get the same distance. So we're going to be hitting the long irons, fairway woods. We're going to be up that end of the bag a lot more often at this time of year. So what does it change? So if we start off with the long iron, we already know we can't use the turf. We can't really drive into it and get the same kind of launch. So you end up trying to pick it a little bit more. So if I do this with the long iron, the tendency is going to be like that one to catch it maybe slightly lower on the face, because the moment you go into the turf, catch it a bit heavy, destroys everything. There's no speed, the ball just ducks out the air, goes nowhere. So that one, marginally low on the face, we're looking at 10.5 launch, 3.2 on spin, just about 200 carry. So this is where the wood or the hybrid comes in. You know, centre of mass being lower and further back helps get it into the bottom of the ball, and relative to loft helps get more flight. So these two are both a 19-degree club. So exactly the same loft, but the wood is designed to be picked off the turf. So rather than kind of driving down into it and compressing it like the irons need to be to get that kind of maximum performance out of them, this isn't designed for that. So I can collect this really easily off the turf, shallow angle attack, make sure I don't catch it heavy. And I've helped it in the air a little bit, but up that ball flight goes. 14.7 launch, same spin, because that's a fairly quiet swing. But we've gone from 200 carry to 217. I put no more effort in. We've gained a little bit of club speed because it's a longer, lighter club. So I've picked up 4 or 5 miles an hour club speed. And without getting it absolutely perfectly, we've gained best part of 20 yards. We know we need the extra carry distance because the ball's not going to run out. We know it's going to stop when it gets there because the ground's soft. So as a consideration, the top bit of the bag, whether it's a 4 or 5 iron replacement into a hybrid, or like for me, a long iron, 2 iron driving iron into a 5 wood, getting that carry distance is going to mean you can effectively play into greens and get more efficient yardage when the ground's that much softer. So also related to ground conditions, you might want to look at wedge bounce. So some players might take the lob wedge out of the bag when these conditions get soft, because do you really need that high floaty shot? The greens are slower, they're going to land and stop a little quicker than they do in the summer when they're firm and fast. But you know, in the summer we play that lob wedge with a ground down back edge to be able to kind of nip under the ball, slide underneath it off that tight firm turf. You know, anything more bounce wise just gets in the way. So in winter, the problem with that is we expose that leading edge. When the ground's softer, the last thing you want is that leading edge coming in, catching. Again, it's that horrid, we all know it, that horrid fat shot where you catch the ground and the ball just bumbles a few yards in front of you because it's just dug in and stopped. So firm turf, it kind of nips underneath. Wet turf, it can get stuck. So going to a wedge with a little more bounce, a little more back edge bounce, just means that there's more angle to play with. You know, we're not having to be as delicate, we're not having to open up and play flop shots as much, but that heavier back edge means that it basically stops that leading edge getting quite so close to the turf, which gives you a little bit more margin of error. The ground's softer, so if you're playing into the turf, that back edge still lets it get into it a bit, but it stops it digging. So, you know, it does mean that on wetter, softer turf, having a little bit more back edge versus more of a ground off back edge that works in summer just gives you a bit more protection in wet lies. So the next major consideration is golf ball. So a lot of players play premium, whether it's a Pro V1, TaylorMade TP5, Callaway, you know, Chrome Soft, Chrome Tour ball through the main body of the season. So why would you change golf ball at this time of year? Well, we've gone through the temperature being lower and the ground being softer, and the ground being softer is really, really key, because what we don't have are firm, fast greens. We have slow, wet, soggy greens. So actually, one of the advantages of the Pro V1 style ball, the urethane cover gives you lots of grip and gives you more spin. Well, if the ball's going to land and plug anyway when it lands on the green, from whatever distance you're playing out of, because it's wet and soft, is that spin really that important? Main answer is no. You know, ultimately, you know, the higher spin ball, it's not grabbing and stopping. You know, is it really going to make a noticeable difference? Yes, a ball like this one, Srixon Soft Feel, it's a harder cover, it launches higher, spins less. We've done videos on this in the past. There's lots of data to back this up. When the ground's firm, if it's launching higher and spinning less, then it's bouncing on through the back a little bit more. It's not grabbing on and stopping with as much control. But if there's ball's not bouncing on and running out, is it that important? Not massively. So moving up the bag, moving into the mid irons, again, between the Pro V1X style ball and Srixon Soft Feel, you know, much softer core, much softer construction. You know, what difference do we see there? Now, actually, with this, it's an awful lot less. You know, you're not hitting the ball hard enough like you do with the driver to compress the core to activate it. So it's much more the outer layers of the ball that make a difference. The cover's not really being used because there's not enough loft. So the grip on the cover is less of an issue with here. And what we're seeing, you know, the data we've gathered here with Pro V1X first and then Srixon Soft Feel second, launch and spin broadly speaking, identical. There's very little difference between them, and certainly in the grand scheme of things, a few hundred revs of spin when the ball's landing and plugging anyway on the green, really not that important. So actually for the mid-irons and the middle part of your game, basically play within reason, whatever board you like. So finally, we're at the top end of the bag. This is actually the bit of the bag, the driver, the woods, driver in particular, where the construction of the ball might just make a noticeable difference. So why with the driver more than anywhere else other than the wedges? Well, the driver is the one that we swing the fastest. Now the premium balls, the tour style balls, need a certain level of club speed to activate the core to optimize spin rate with the driver. So we've already talked about temperature and clothing levels and just swinging the club a bit slower generally. So we're losing speed. Now it's potentially is up to kind of 5 or 6 miles an hour down, which isn't insignificant. So based on that, is playing a tour style ball in winter really necessary to optimize driver performance? Actually, a lot of us could get away with playing a softer core ball, because actually the softer core with the driver, you're activating the core more easily because it doesn't need as much of a hit, and therefore you're getting optimum low spin with the driver. Now, run out's a little less important in winter, so is that low spin really critical? Not necessarily, but the softer core will also potentially launch just that little bit higher as well. So in terms of getting the most out of the golf ball at the top end of the bag, this is really where a slightly softer core, a softer model, a less premium model, will actually get the best out of in cold temperatures, just that little bit more. You may squeeze just a few yards extra out of it. It's not going to feel quite as harsh off the face, but in principle with the driver, you can definitely afford to go down one model at least and gain just a hair more. It's easier to get the best out of the golf ball when the temperature's really cold. So to summarize, what are the key takeaways for winter golf? Well, number one, temperature going down. The ball's going to travel less, you're going to be hitting more club into greens, the body's not going to move as far, so temper your expectations on distance, you're just not going to hit it as far. Number two, ground conditions, the general conditions, wetter, heavier, again, reduced distance. The softer turf means the ball's not flying as high, so getting carry distance and looking at club selection, potentially switching into a lofted wood or a hybrid instead of a long iron, a little bit more bounce on a wedge, but the lofted wood versus the long iron to get flight and carry distance easily, make it easier on yourself. The course is playing longer, you're going to be hitting those clubs more, so take that into consideration. The other part's golf ball. Do you really need that ultra premium urethane covered golf ball that gives you loads of spin around the greens? The ground's softer, the ball's going to stop anyway. And actually, is that drop off in performance, short game performance, when you go to a softer core ball and a firmer cover, is that really that much? Is it going to negatively affect your game? You take that one into consideration as well. That softer ball might also feel a little nicer playing in cold conditions. Other small incidentals to consider as well. With that golf ball change, you're going to save a bit of money, and it's always frustrating when you lose a golf ball under leaves or when it's plugged in a fairway. It's the most annoying $5 to $7 you can spend, or pounds that you can spend on a premium golf ball when you've hit it down the middle and you can't find the darn thing. So frustrating. Another element, consider turning the loft up a little bit on your driver. Make sure you get that height and carry. Pretty much every driver now has an adjustable sleeve. You can turn the loft up that little bit, and it might change the grip position on some drivers, but you might consider that to get a little bit more carry. And then the final bit is, we're not generally playing as serious a golf. So do you really need all those clubs in the bag? A lot of the time in winter, with the course being wet, we're actually not allowed to use a buggy or use a trolley. So you're carrying most of the time. If you're using a 3-wood, for example, for total run-out yardage, you're not getting that run-out anyway. So do you really need that club? We're hitting driver off most tees. The lofted wood is going to carry a little bit more easily. Can you reduce the number of clubs in your bag? Again, if you're carrying, it's heavy turf, it's harder to walk. Make it easier on yourself, carry a few less clubs. So hopefully those little hints and tips about how to play winter golf and what you might want to change will help you get the most out of your game in winter. And with that in mind, also just keep those expectations nice and low. The weather's worse, it's colder, the courses aren't in as good condition, so don't be too hard on yourself if you don't score as well as you might in summer. It's a tough game at the best of conditions, let alone now. So if you've enjoyed that, hit the like button, subscribe, and give you more tips and hints soon.